I've been caught, but I'm keeping on check. And I've been taught, but I'm keeping on check. And I've been broken.
Good afternoon, good evening. This is Dove Tusman. You're back on Equal Footing. Happy winter to everyone. Holiday season. You know, this is a time of year when it seems like envy comes to the fore in our lives. Often, as we've talked about on this program, when nightfall comes earlier, we often are affected by their circadian rhythms. Sometimes people feel more loneliness, higher incidence of depression. And we see around us other people's joyousness and celebration, happiness, or so we think. And we have feelings of envy, feeling of someone else has something that I want. It could be material, something that's kind of an emotional sense of well-being, even spiritual. Oh, that person's more evolved than me. And when it really gets dark, and we've talked about this in the program before, we experience schadenfreude, like we experience even pleasure at other people's losing happiness, losing material things. So it's not only that we want something that we don't have, it's we want to take away something that someone else has. A spiritual teacher early in my life gave me a lesson around this in the material world by saying you should get rid of what you haven't got. Think about that for a second. Get rid of what you haven't got. We spend so much of our life focused on what we don't have. A bigger house, a better job, less pain from some ailment, a better marriage, more children, less children, something that we don't have. But it's an illusion. We don't have it. If we can get rid of that sense of emptiness and instead focus on the fullness of our lives, everything changes. A great psychoanalyst, that'll probably come up again in this program, Melanie Klein, talked about envy and gratitude being the opposite of each other. They can't coexist. And they're both primal. They're both emotions that we learn in the earliest days of life. All right. Let's get into this very personal subject tonight of envy. We're joined by two people who have lovingly been on the show before. It's such a great pairing. Rabbi Stephen Bars. Rabbi Bars has spoken all over the world, from the U.S. Senate to the Los Angeles Improv stage. He's been a regular speaker at Fortune magazine summits. Rabbi Bars is known for imparting really important ideas with creativity and humor and simplicity. He's the author of the Washington Post bestseller, Win, Change Your Thinking, Change Your Destiny. It's available also on Amazon. Also, Bliss, the Marriage and Parenting book. Rabbi Bars and his wife, Ruth, they have 7 children. They probably don't identify with that desire I said earlier about having more. Who knows? Rabbi Bars, welcome back to Equal Footing.
Exactly. Thank you.
Rabbi, it's always fun to pair you when I can convince our wonderful producer, Leah, who's, as you know, a trained psychoanalyst, a clinical psychologist, trained both in France and the U.S., a relationship therapist. When you guys are on the air together, it's really fun for me. You bring different perspectives. And I convinced again Leah to come in front of the glass, in front of the production studio side and be on air tonight again. Leah, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Rabbi, first of all, in Judaism, we talk about, I think it's 7 core emotions. Is envy one of those?
It's one of the core bad ones, for sure.
How does it fit in the totem pole? Is it the worst?
Envy takes you out of the world. It destroys your life. Whatever you have, it just ruins it. You won't find it. There's a great quote you said at the beginning. it's not just gratitude. You won't find anybody who has envy who's enjoying life. It's not possible to have envy and enjoy life at the same time. You've got to pick one or the other.
Well, unless you use it as a force to push yourself forward. But it's a very small percentage of the population that actually does that.
Interesting. Always with the positive attitude. Leah, let me ask you the difference, I guess, clinically. I get confused sometimes between what is the difference between envy and jealousy?
It's about something you have and something you don't. So envy is when you desire something you don't have that someone else has. And jealousy is when you have something and you're afraid other people might take it away. Be it a partner, a job, anything that has to do with something that you are in possession of. But obviously you're not in possession of your partner, but just to make the analogy clearer. And envy is something you're not in possession of.
I found that fascinating as we were preparing for the program. I always thought jealousy had to do more with romantic relationships and envy had to do more with material things. But I've learned in preparing for this program that isn't the case, that both can have to do with either. But as you said, it's about what you have and what you don't. And the other thing I found very interesting, Rabbi, in studying this a little bit prior to the program, is that envy isn't, in a sense, more intense because it's, as psychologists call, dyadic, like it's between two people, because you identify something you don't have that someone else does and you want it. And maybe you want to destroy them having it even. And whereas jealousy can touch a lot of different folks. You can feel jealous about your wonderful wife and other folks' interest in her, and that could be, many other people's interests. So it's like, it's in a certain sense more dispersed and less intense, whereas envy is like, I, in a certain sense, want to destroy that person's happiness. Is that one-on-one relationship something that we get some biblical guidance about, Rabbi?
It is an amazing story. I'm sure your readers, your listeners have heard of it. It's the famous story of King Solomon. That King Solomon is called the wisest man that ever lived. And his fame was spread throughout the world because of two women who had babies, and one of the babies died, and the mother of the dead baby switched the babies. So the mother of the live baby came in and recognized that it wasn't her baby, saw her neighbor with her baby, and grabbed hold of it, and they both end up in King Solomon's court. And the famous story, he pulls out a sword and says, I'll cut the baby in half, and you can have half each. And, there's the old joke that comes right after this, that two women come in, both claiming that this boy had betrothed this young girl in marriage. This boy betrothed their daughter in marriage. And King Solomon threatens to split them in half, and they can make both your daughters. And one woman says yes, and the other woman says no, and King Solomon says the one who said yes, cut him in half. That's the real mother-in-law.
Mm.
so you know the other story, the one that was actually in the Bible, the one who said cut him, she can have him, is the real mother. And the question is, that's not such genius. We've experienced not that long ago mothers in the Holocaust who had a choice to give up their child to the Polish neighbor or take them to Auschwitz. And there were many women who gave up their children. In fact, it's a big issue in Israel at the moment. These boys, these children are showing up.
My great-grandmother did that, Rabbi. My grandmother in blessed memory was housed by a righteous family, and it was her mother who told her to go to that house knowing she'd never see her daughter again, but knowing that she had a better chance of survival.
Wow, that's amazing. Exactly. So what's the genius of King Solomon? That the real mother said, yes, let her have it. And the answer is because he knew that the other woman said cut him in half. That is kind of strange. We don't expect mothers to want other people's children to die.
Yeah, that's an interesting take on that story, because we all have heard that King Solomon story and identifying the real mother, and you don't get a lot of focus on the other mother, the other woman who presumably also is children who says, okay, cut the baby in half. And I asked you ahead of the program, and I want to ask you again on the air. Does King Solomon anticipate that level of sociopathy from one of his citizens?
Absolutely. He completely understood. He understood that one of the mothers is lying. Two women cannot have one baby. As sophisticated science gets, it can't get that sophisticated. So two women cannot have one baby. So he knows one of the women is lying. One of the women stole someone else's baby. So he has to understand, well, why would she do such a thing like that? And the answer is envy. She was envious of her baby died, and she can't bear that the woman next door has a baby. And you learn a very important principle from this. Envy isn't that I want what you have. It's I don't want you to have what you have.
And so I think that sometimes when we think about lessons from Chumash, biblical lessons, we think of them as all positive. I mean, I shouldn't say that. Obviously, there's Cain and Abel, and so there's lots of admonitions or warnings of the bad. But in a certain sense, this parable seems to be telling us that envy is a fundamental part of the human condition. And that, Leah, my understanding is that academic psychology arrives at the same conclusion, that it's like one of the constitutional elements of self is envy, and it comes almost from the beginning of our existence.
So it's funny, if we feel we are or we identify with a person, or we feel we are similar to them, the more envious we are. So if we think someone looks like us and is in a similar age and demographic, the more envious we will be of them, because we see ourselves in them and something that they have that we don't. So in the case of a benign envy, it can be as a driving force for ambition to move forward, to have things that you want but lack the drive of actually getting. So from an evolutionary perspective, it's not all bad.
When does it first manifest? I know that psychologists really focus on the infant's experience. And how does envy first manifest in the infant?
I think you're referring to the Klein theory of when a baby is breastfeeding and is frustrated when there's no milk left in the breast, and then feels envious for something that they don't have, because they don't think the breast is a part of the mother. They think a breast is either a part of themselves or an object that they control, an object that they're a part of. And that's like that's theoretically the first manifestation of envy in an infant.
I mean, it speaks to me, because all parents out there, you know that's like seems to be the first place that infants express like frustration and anger is, when they're hungry and they're not getting something that effectively they think they possess and have control over. And I wonder, Rabbi, before our first break, is there what you're hearing here from Leah from the psychological perspective, does that resonate in terms of the biblical definition of envy and what we're told not to partake in? Rabbi, you may be on mute.
Sorry, I was on mute. I just told everybody next week's winning lottery numbers, and you were on mute, so sorry about that. So, you both bring up great points, and you mentioned Cain and Abel, which is really the story of envy, because Cain is envious of Abel because Abel's sacrifice offering was accepted. So what does he do? He killed Abel. Well, how does that help him?
Right.
It doesn't. Because the whole point of envy is, I don't want what you have. As Leah referenced, that what envy is really about is that I'm a good person, is that I am loved. We want these things because we think that going to make us feel good about ourselves. It's nothing to do with the thing itself. It's because this, whatever happens at Bentley or whatever, the sacrifice or whatever it happens to be, is a symbol of the I'm accepted, I'm good.
Yeah. I'm loved. I am part of this social circle.
Yeah.
Isn't it just fascinating how it's so destructive? How we think we're going to, like you said with the story of Cain and Abel, become happier by destroying something else or someone else's happiness.
Right. But it's very interesting what Lev brings out. Napoleon famously is quoted as saying, "If I had enough ribbon, I could conquer the world." So what is that all about? Is that I want the acknowledgement that I'm a good person, that I'm a hero, and people therefore are willing to risk their lives for such a thing.
Yeah.
We're talking about this complex, multifaceted emotion of envy. It's when we perceive that someone else possesses something that we desire but lack. We're here with Rabbi Stephen Bars, who's an author and life coach. Leah Tuzman, who's our wonderful producer and my partner and clinical psychologist. Participate. Let us know what's going on in your life, how you're trying to resist the clutches of envy, and how do you channel envy? Because, we can't avoid feeling it, but we can channel what we do with the feeling. You can call in live, 718-303-9090. We're live on the air till 8 p.m. Eastern. That's 718-303-9090. You can also text or WhatsApp in a question or comment to a different number. Please don't call this number. Just for texting, 917-428-4062. That's 917-428-4062. We'll be right back.
Sunshine.
So as we come to the end of this year, Leah, what are we on, our 5th year? I think we're almost up to 250 episodes of Equal Footing. We are embarking on a new era for this program that is listener supported. So we can continue being on the air, asking challenging questions. The commercial support is great, but the enduring, our ability to endure as a program depends on you. So how have we done this? Patreon, Patreon, has a channel called Equal Footing with Dove Tuzman, and you can access that on your smartphone, download the Patreon app, or you can go to patreon.com, and you get behind-the-scenes content, a little bit of how the sausage is made, and we give subscribers different levels of content that maybe is a little, more piquant or spicier than we can put on the air. Subscribe and support us in whatever way you can. Go to Patreon, Equal Footing with Dove Tuzman.
I've been caught, but I'm keeping on check. I've been told.
Okay, Rabbi, it's easy to talk about envy as something we should always avoid, but I want to challenge you to look at situations where maybe envy is the right human reaction. When I was young, I was a volunteer in India, and I was working with the Adivasi villagers. This is the lowest rung of the caste system in India. And an indigent population, absolute poverty, a lot of substance abuse issues at the time, and issues around access to healthy food and drinking water. And yet this constant, paired with constantly being stepped on and with really no basic human respect, at least at that time, in that caste system. Now, that it seems perfectly reasonable for an Adivasi villager in India to feel envy of something that I have or you have. And I would say even under those conditions, to maybe want to take away something that we have, to kind of destroy it. I can appreciate that type of reaction. Is that a situation where envy is not only to be expected, but it's okay? It's what Leah referred to as kind of the benign envy?
No. It's very destructive. I'll tell you a story. My father, may he rest in peace, he was a great man, and he grew up in London. And he used to tell me when I was a little boy, like the starving people in Africa. So he would say, I grew up in a home that did not have an indoor toilet. Right? Americans are in shock when I tell this story. So I asked him, I said, did you feel poor? And he said, no, because we didn't know any difference. We didn't know there was any, the Queen of England, right? This is how she behaved too. Back in Paris did not have an indoor toilet. Right? It's when your goal is to have something because someone else has it, you might end up with it, but you won't be happy with it.
That's a really great point. And that goes to something I wanted to say earlier, that we're talking about envy through the prism of what we don't have, but we're not talking about envy through the prism of introspection of self and self-analysis of what that means about us when we're envious about something that we don't have. What does it mean? Are we lacking? If we have this object, then will we be happy? We can't be happy by external things.
Exactly. I have met a number of divorce lawyers. One of the reasons, I hope there's no divorce lawyers who are listening here, but one of the reasons divorce lawyers do so well is the couple, whichever side you got, are suing the other side, not because they need whatever it happens to be, but because they want to punish the other couple.
Right.
And that pays for an awful lot of Porsches in these divorce lawyers.
I mean, this is though, guys, a really, really difficult thing to internalize, that someone else's, beautiful big house is not necessarily what we need at this moment. It's not necessarily Hashem's plan for us. And I don't mean that in kind of throw up your hands, oh, it is what it is way, but there may not be the lessons that we need to learn, the challenges that we need to face to grow. And that level of consciousness it's difficult to maintain. They got to be consulting with you a lot, Rabbi.
That's absolutely true. I get this question a lot. Today's world, people are absorbed with jealousy and envy. I always tell people, who was Bernie Madoff's biggest victim?
Maybe Bernie Madoff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? He's the one who suffered the most. What are you envious of him for?
Right.
King Solomon said, don't be envious of the people who do the wrong thing. They have a terrible life.
Yeah, you never know how the story ends. Rabbi, I want to go back, though, for a moment to my example of the Adivasi villager at the bottom rung of the Indian caste system. It's hard for me to believe that getting shelter and food and basic medicine isn't going to contribute to happiness. And so I think that that's a reasonable perspective, as opposed to, as we sit here in Western society where most of us have, our basic needs met, and it's more a little bit more like metaphysical.
Yeah, that's true, but nevertheless, there's an awful lot of the basic human needs that the guy in the African village, or Indian village, is getting that we don't have. He has a peace of mind that the average person in the streets of Manhattan do not have. The Mother Teresa is quoted as saying that when she came to America for the first time, she said, I never saw such poverty. She was living in the streets of Calcutta.
Yeah, poverty of spiritual poverty.
Poverty of soul.
Yeah.
You can have everything you want, right? And it's a disaster. People are living lives of misery.
The one thing that discomfits me here a little bit is this kind of it exists in Hinduism and in Christianity in different ways, that if you are the downtrodden and you're the poor and you're suffering, that not only is that your lot, like in Hinduism, it's like, okay, that's your karma from a previous life. In Christianity, there's a sense of dignity around it. So that's your lot. And you know, not only accept it, but like really almost give thanks for the fact that you're going through that type of suffering. It just kind of keeps people in their place. And I think you were getting at that a little bit before, Leah, that like envy can be the fuel for, you know, I hate to be politically incorrect or spiritually or halachically incorrect, but like envy can be a fuel that kind of, you know, lifts you up through, I guess, ambition. And
it can be a tool that drives you toward providing more for yourself. But again, going back to what I said earlier, and the example I think you gave for the people in the Indian village you mentioned is not fair, because, you know, it's not envying basic human needs. It's just surviving in that point. But going back to envy, it all comes from this, it's more in like Western capitalistic societies in which if you're not producing and if you're not having, then your worth is lower than other people's worth that are having more and producing more, which is just not a healthy nor a happy way to live life at the very basic element of it. And it's the feeling of envy is greatly tied to our relationship with how we view ourselves and our and how capable we think we are.
Well, we have a caller. Please, if you could wait till after the break, we'll pick you up. And we're going to take a break in a sec. Rabbi, I want to go back to Scripture and talk about where it seems to me envy is the kind of foremost subject in a part of Torah, and that's in the life of Joseph. And we'll look at that after the break. Often it's looked at in a very simplistic way around the jealousy of Joseph's brothers. I want to expand the lens a little bit and see what lessons that teaches us about envy in our daily life today in almost 2025. We'll be right back on Equal Footing with Rabbi Stephen Bars and Leah Tuzman.
Satellite of love, satellite of love, satellite of love, satellite of.
Equal Footing with Dove Tuzman is sponsored by MDCS Dermatology, your experts in skincare. With 2 Manhattan locations and 4 offices in Long Island, including Plainview and Commack, the dermatologists and skincare surgeons at MDCS are proud to be affiliated with the Albert Einstein College of Medicine and New York Presbyterian Hospital. So schedule your next skin exam in one of MDCS's convenient New York area locations. To make an appointment, go to www.mdcs.live or call 212-661-DERM. That's 212-661-3376. You can even schedule a virtual video visit with MDCS's board-certified dermatologists from the comfort and safety of your own home. So go to www.mdcs.live or call 212-661-3376. And don't forget to mention Equal Footing for 15% off all cosmetic procedures.
I've been caught, but I'm keeping on to. I've been taught.
All right. So Joseph, you know, the 11th son of Jacob, there's 12 brothers altogether. I mean, this is from Genesis, and it's a story that's so rich in themes of like jealousy and betrayal, envy, faith, and of course, redemption. I'm going to probably botch this, but just for those that aren't that familiar with the story of Joseph, quick overview. Like I said, he's the favorite son. He also comes very late in his father's life. Father loves him so much, he makes him this coat of many colors, and this sparks envy amongst his brothers who want the coat. And he has these prophetic dreams of his brothers and even his parents like bowing to him, which probably further fuels, I don't know if that's envy or jealousy. But then ultimately Joseph is sold into slavery, One would argue out of envy. His brothers actually initially planned to kill him, but they instead sell him to a caravan heading into Egypt. And they deceive the father, Jacob, by presenting Joseph's robe stained with goat's blood. So his father thinks he's dead, ends up living in Egypt, and of course, is in prison for a while, but then ends up being an advisor to the Pharaoh, who seeks his help interpreting dreams. He gets his favor, becomes very powerful in Egypt, and ultimately there is reconciliation at the end when he encounters his brothers again, who previously hated him, and it's tough. He kind of swallows his pride, one would say, but accepts his brothers. Now, first of all, Rabbi, how was that? How was my Cliff Notes of the life of Joseph?
Very good. I can. You want to go into the rabbinate? Let me know. I'll find you a position.
It's like the show sometimes challenges me to remember Hebrew school. Okay, so Rabbi, why is this? I would think the story of Joseph is like one of the 3 or 4 like central stories, at least as a kid, that really makes you. It gives you has that impact and has all these different layers of meaning. And there are 2 things that I remember pulling away, that I pulled out of it as a kid, as I think back. One is this coat of many colors, and this idea that he was like adorned, and then it's, I think, the first time in the Bible, maybe the only time, we're directly talking about a material object that people are envious of. And why is this such a core issue? Like, spiritually, shouldn't this be like just a nanosecond of coverage? Like, don't want what other people have, or, be happy for what other people have. Why is this such a focal point?
It really touches on the concept that we've been discussing, even though they thought of it as the coat, but it really was a reflection of their relationship to their father, Jacob. And the coat represented that Joseph is more loved. And that created the jealousy, which is what the essence of what jealousy really is.
Yeah.
It's never the material thing. That's why you see people all over the world. They get what they think they want, and it doesn't make them happy, because they really want the love and acceptance and the recognition. And things don't give you that.
The other part of the story that stuck with me as a lesson is at the end, where knowing that he was hated, knowing that he was sold into slavery by his brothers, he ultimately forgives and accepts. And I don't think when we talk about envy, we prescriptively talk about, not experiencing and how it does a disservice to us. But in a certain sense, it also, there's this reconciliation, this opportunity for coming together with when we want to take someone's happiness away. There is that, I said at the outset of the show, that dyadic thing, that one-on-one relationship, that there's an opportunity for redemption that I don't think you'd have if you didn't have the distance and the rupture to begin with.
Right, that's beautifully put. You see, the book of Genesis starts with this jealousy, Cain and Abel, and it ends with it. And Genesis is really the core of the whole Torah, the whole Bible. And it ends with the story of Ephraim and Manasseh. You remember the famous story that Jacob crosses his hands and gives the blessing to the younger child, Ephraim. And that's how we bless our boys. And that's Mark Weinberg itself. It explains, why do we bless our boys? They should be like Ephraim and Manasseh, not Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or Moses, right, or Joseph. Because more than we want our children to be successful in life, we want them to figure out how not to let jealousy destroy their lives and get along. Because you're never going to get, this guy's taller, that guy's shorter, this guy's got more money, that's got less money, he's a better basketball player. Everyone We've all got gifts that are special to us, and the only way to be happy is to get along despite. Two brothers figured it out, Ephraim and Manasseh. It took a long time, but they did it.
This is where I always feel like I actually have a home in my birth faith, because when you get into that mystical level of that the challenges are put in front of us for our own personal growth, which is such a hard consciousness, like I said before, to keep. But when we stay in that place, it all makes so much more sense. And the gratitude at that point, even for a hardship, is present. And like you said earlier, in the presence of gratitude, we can't have envy, and vice versa. All right, let's take a call. We have a couple on the line. And, all right, so line 2, you're on the air. Can you hear us? I think this is Stan.
You think correctly.
Hi, Stan.
Hi, good evening. How are you?
Good.
First of all, happy Hanukkah to you, and Happy New Year if I don't talk to you again this year. It's coming to the end, so I want to wish you that.
To you as well.
Okay, let's forget the theological mumbo-jumbo on envy, because without it, there is no civilization. Without it, there is no advancement. The human chromosome a man needs, or woman needs envy. It is part of their makeup for advancement. I envy you. I envy and then they do this, or they attack, or go to war. I envy. I want what they. That is part of sadly, of the human makeup, and without it, we do not advance, or as I see it, and we have it. Without it, we don't move forward. Without it, we don't seek knowledge. We need it, and Cain and Abel had it. One kills the other, and then we know what happened to him. Every religious leader in the Bible had it and used it for their own advancement and their own destruction and killing of others. And good as well. So let's not fool ourselves. Envy is a necessary chromosome in the human species.
Let's actually get both Leah's and the rabbi's response.
Okay.
Leah, what do you is Stan right from your perspective? Like, I don't know, on the physiology.
Envy has an evolutionary purpose. It is undeniable because we wouldn't have envy otherwise. So I agree in the evolutionary perspective of why we have envy, but I think we're evolved and aware enough in today's time where we can recognize that it's an unhealthy thing to have.
You know, we did a show a few years ago, early on, maybe 4 years ago now, on a series on David HaMelech, on King David, and at that time it almost got us kicked off the air. Even though some of the questions were ones that have been asked for many centuries about the flawed life path of King David, and that of course ultimately leads to great things, some through this process of redemption and contrition and forgiveness. Rabbi, what do you think about Stan's comment? It seems like there are characters like David HaMelech in the Bible who are at times clearly driven by envy. Is it in fact a positive force in Hashem's plan?
Well, I don't think there's going to be many times you're going to hear me quoting accusations, but
sorry, say it again. Quoting
the United Nations.
Okay.
Stan, even the United Nations has come to realize that, and they quote Isaiah here, the famous Isaiah war out in front of the United States. One of the few times they've ever quoted a Jew to positive terms. And they realize that jealousy and the whole reason for the United Nations is that jealousy has destroyed the world. If it wasn't for the fact that the world come to realize that what we've said all along, if you don't control this and curb your jealousy, you're going to just keep destroying the world. Communism was really just a silly means, imbecilic means of trying to combat jealousy. Karl Marx thought you could do it by like getting rid of money, which is absurd. But nevertheless, you see how crucial it is that we combat this curse.
Yeah, and I guess just because we see even our patriarchs and matriarchs succumb at times to envy, or at least appear to, that doesn't mean it's being endorsed. It's being, presented as part of the human condition, as we've talked about on this show. And I think one of the beautiful things, in my humble opinion, about the Jewish faith is that we don't present even the most righteous, the tzaddikim in our history, as being flawless. We all are human. And I think that it allows us also to, be fully embracing of the growth that we can have. I think one of the hardest things, Leah, I imagine in your practice as a therapist, as a relationship therapist, is eradicating, maybe that's a wrong word, but dealing with situations of really intense jealousy and envy, and they, can effectively make a relationship dysfunctional.
Although what I find the most difficult isn't the eradication of jealousy and envy, but it's the acceptance of them both. For me, it's not important to, it is important to let go of envy and jealousy because they don't serve you. But what's also important is to just recognize that you have these feelings, and they're not good or bad, they're feelings, and feelings aren't facts. You need to explore what's going on beneath the surface with your relationship with yourself that is leading you to envy and jealousy.
Well, I guess Dan is saying it does serve us. And you said it before evolutionarily. Look, we just elected a president who may do wonderful things, God willing, will do wonderful things in his second administration. And at the same time, by his own clear and unabashed admission, is sometimes driven by what we could define as envy. And so, clearly it's a motivator for some, and a really effective motivator for some. Let's take a caller on line one who's been patient. Line one. Hi, can you hear us?
Hi, it's Rifki from Borough Park.
Hi,
You have to excuse me. I'm suffering from the flu, but I'm going to try to deal with this. I used to be a teacher.
I hope you feel better.
Yes, thank you. First of all, it says in Pirkei Avos that envy takes the person away from this world.
Yes,
it literally kills the person.
Yeah.
Now, I used to be a teacher, and as a teacher, we use envy to motivate the children. The first one that gets online is the best, the first one that does this, the first one that does that. And then one day I got hold of a book called Our Classroom. And the book explained that by using envy as a motivator, you are causing the children to push each other down.
Yeah.
And you're not getting unity in the classroom.
That is so
true. In order to get unity, you have to have them work together to reach that goal. And this was an eye-opener for me, this book. My whole thinking changed, and I went about getting the children to work together on projects instead of trying to get them to compete with one another.
Yeah, at the root of envy is comparison, right? Think like you're talking about teaching children, Rifki. Think of the child's cry of, it's not fair. Why her? Why not me? Yeah. And that comparison is so destructive.
Yeah, Rifki, what you shared is so beautiful because you're not teaching children to see what they're lacking. Someone else is better than them, but you're teaching them to see what they have, what their worth is, in order to collaborate together. No one's better than anyone.
And that we could be more successful when we work together.
Yeah, that is so true later in life.
Rabbi, this brings up a question, Rifki's point. that is there a place though for comparison that's helpful? Because it feels like there's so much application of metrics and comparison in Torah, often about like how we can be better, or God admonishing the people of Israel to be better or disappointed and so forth. So clearly comparison does have a role, but maybe not comparing ourselves to other. Help listeners understand how comparison can be helpful and when it's not.
Well, what the caller just mentioned and may have mentioning is phenomenal. And also non-profits should be, one of my pet peeves is non-profits should be comparing themselves to what they used to be. And in that, jealousy or envy, if you want to call it, is a very powerful force that we should be envious of who we could be compared to who we were. So we look at ourselves and go, let's say for instance you're on a diet. This is something Thomas Jefferson talked about. That if you're trying to achieve something, you should compare yourself to yourself. So if last week you only ate 10 cookies, so this week I'm going to be 9 cookies. If we focus on how much better using our own self as the guide, then it's a very powerful force.
Yeah. When the comparison is about, that resonates for me, Rabbi. When I'm like not comparing myself to others in terms of what I have, but rather how can I be better, like comparing it to the better version of myself, maybe last year or tomorrow, or whatever. Then it's helpful when it's on that scale. It's just, it never has really served me in my life to come. And with all due respect to Stan's earlier comment, it's never truly served me to compare myself to others. I'm not living in anyone else's body and anyone else's life, really. It's just my experience. And so it's a very tricky spiritual lesson. We'll be right back on Equal Footing. We're joined by Rabbi Stephen Bars, who's a wonderful life coach and acclaimed author, and my partner and wonderful clinical psychologist, Leah Tuzman. We'll be right back.
You can go your own way. Tell me why everything turned around.
I think tonight's musical selection is like all 70s. Maybe that first one was maybe late 60s. Okay. Mechanical Art Capital has been a wonderful sponsor of the program for years. Mechanical Art Capital is for you if you are a watch dealer or a watch collector. You can get cash from your collection or your inventory overnight, max 2 days. It is halachically sound. It's not a loan. It's very reasonable financing costs through a buyback program. Mechanical Art Capital buys inventory, and then you have the opportunity to buy it back over a period of time. You can check it out by downloading the Mechanical Art Capital app on your iPhone or your Android device. You got to put in 3 separated words in your app store. Mechanical Art Capital. You can also go to mechanicalartcapital.com. You just download a couple of photos or videos of your watches. You get an indicative offer right away and cash in your pocket as early as the next day or the day after. So check it out. Mechanical Art Capital.
I've been caught, but I'm keeping on to. And I've been told.
I wasn't sure how controversial tonight's program was going to be. Sometimes we get into this personal growth stuff. It can feel,
we'll have a lot of opinions.
It can feel light, but then you never know. So here we go. We're going to delve into Middle Eastern politics. You ready? Going back now, we're going to start with thousands of years ago. So one of our regular listeners, Ellie, says it's important to note, when the people of Israel are approaching the land of Israel, land of Canaan, milk and honey, there is no statement about taking it away from someone else. The focus is on achieving. It's something that in effect is there for the having. And yes, there's conquering, but there doesn't seem to be envy. Now, I'm not sure I agree, Ellie. Rabbi, what do you think? I mean, isn't there pretty robust discussion about taking over of, there's existing towns and tribes and so forth in the land of Canaan, and that's taken over by the people of Israel?
That's true. It's a fascinating thing, but it actually says that when you conquer the land, you'll take it over very slowly. It won't be like what's happened in Syria. You just one day you've got a whole country. It's a very slow process, and because you have to grow into something. It's a very interesting phenomena. You see this in the music business. In the old classics like the Beethovens and the Mozarts, these people often died with their boots on, composing till the end. But in the modern music business, the rock and the pop music, there's a phenomenon where they achieve a peak and then they disappear. It's not like they keep going. You don't see the Beatles. And the reason is because they get caught up in jealousy and resentment because they get ripped off. It wasn't a gradual process of success like Mozart experienced.
I'm not grasping. So why does the slow taking over of the land involve less envy than rapid conquering?
Because you come to acclimate the success
not to
into
take
your
away.
life without having to be jealous of other people of other people being jealous of you. So it's a slow acclimation that's very important. King Solomon again says, success achieved quickly is very destructive.
So how do you think envy, Rabbi, to put you on the spot, is applied to the current conflict between the Palestinians and the State of Israel?
Well, it's clear the Palestinians are just absorbed with jealousy and envy. In 1948, when the Jews won and the Arabs lost, the Arabs just went home. But now they can't give up. They're just, even till just recently, they're shooting more missiles. The Houthis are shooting missiles, and Israel's coming out, which basically does nothing. And Israel's coming and blasting them to kingdom come. What are they doing? It's the same as a divorce lawyer. It's not because they want anything from Israel. It's they just don't want Israel to have whatever Israel has. When you put it in that paradigm...
It's true that there have been numerous offers going back now, 75+ years to, for, land and sovereignty. And it seems that it's not enough. It's not only what I want, you can't have it.
Right. And they're willing to suffer tremendously. It's the same kind of action you see in divorce cases, that people are willing to risk everything and lose tremendous amounts so the other person won't get it.
There's been a couple of studies on Wall Street trading. One oft quoted is that people remember their losses more than their gains. But related to that is that people often have more a feeling of self-graded success that's higher when a competitor loses than when you win, which is, we talked about in the show on Schadenfreude. That's so disturbing. Okay, there's a listener who writes, and direct this question to you, Leah. I know you were bonding with Rifki earlier from an educational perspective. He says, I think envy is a form of a gut feeling. It's a guiding system to help you know what you want or don't want in life. And I actually think it needs to be taught to kids at home and in schools.
That's an interesting perspective. I disagree with it completely because it puts you in a comparison with other people for the rest of your life. And it doesn't really help understand what you want. It helps you understand what other people have and what you should
want.
What
you're told you should want.
What you're told you should want. So it sets you up for a lifetime of people pleasing and being not connected to your true self. So with all the respect in the world, I completely disagree with that statement. We should not teach our children envy. We should teach them to collaborate, to cooperate, to see their fellow classmates as capable as they are, and that will lead to inspiration instead of the feeling of not worthy.
Absolutely, Leah. I'm right behind you. Fantastic.
There's a psychologist, Monica Vermani, who's written quite a bit on envy, and she points out that it is the emotion that is the most secretive in her experience. People are more likely to share that they have almost any other emotion, including lurid desires and other things that are difficult to share in therapy, than envy. Envy is unenviable. I think this is interesting, Rabbi, in that it's something that really resonated to me. No one would say,
"Yeah, I'm envious."
I'm envious. Like sometimes people are okay saying I'm jealous.
Yeah.
Like, I feel a little jealousy because it's kind of like in modern, I'm not sure jealousy is any better than envy, but it's kind of like,
More
I really
acceptable.
love the person, so I'm jealous. But that's about, like you said, Leah, something I already possess, so to speak. And whereas no one says proudly, I'm envious.
Yeah.
What do you think about this, Rabbi?
Yeah, no, it's actually true. But it's very interesting. When we talk about the positives, there's a famous quote from one of the great rabbis. He says, "Nobody ever got to shul earlier than me."
Okay.
Right? When it comes to the positive aspects of people's lives, then it's wonderful to be envious. I wish I was as happy as this person is. It depends how you use it. And again, using it for the past. There's a great story, Dave Brownsford. He took over the English cycling team. In the 100-year history of the Tour de France, the English have never won. And he announced we're going to win in 5 years, and they actually won in 3, and they won 3 more times after that. And he asked them how he did it. He said, we took everything we do in cycling and just improved it 1%. And by those small increments, we became the best cycling team in the world.
Yeah, and that's the comparison that works when you're comparing it to your own behavior.
Right, that's
To
right.
your previous self, your previous way of doing something. Yeah.
Exactly.
So one of our regular listeners, Yocheved, has pointed out that the mystical aspect of this that you referred to earlier is really at the core. In Zohar, it says that God orchestrates every episode that God orchestrates the entire episode. Referring to the story of Joseph. In this reading, the fact that the brothers started the process based in envy allows for the redemption later. I did refer to that, and I think we're going to end on this point. In this sense, can Rabbi and Leah, can you agree that envy does serve a purpose? You're saying from an evolutionary perspective, and Rabbi from a growth perspective, so that it's a challenge that we can see, identify, and overcome.
Absolutely. It's very powerful. When maturity is all about coming to realize what you really want out of life, the meaning, and passing through envy to realize that we are loved, we are good, we are happy, we can be happy. Our future is dependent upon us, not what other people have.
I love that.
Not going to make them happy.
That helps me, Rabbi, because I get gratitude eradicates envy. I don't always find myself, I can't always be in the space of gratitude, but I can always identify when I feel envy and say, okay, what is this leading me to? What is the lesson right now for me to overcome? So, Rabbi Bars, thank you for joining us. Leah, thanks for getting on the mic.
Real pleasure.
Thank you so
real
much,
pleasure.
everyone.
We'll catch everyone next week, at the beginning of Hanukkah.
You can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want. But if you try sometime, well, you might just find that you're watching it.